We've been getting lost in the depths of a pyramid.
We've been playing Entombed by John Sherman.
Hi, I'm Libby, this is Julian, and together we are BoxedMeeples, and we have been sent a prototype copy of the game Entombed that we've been playing. It's a John Sherman game.
Now, in this game, imagine it's the 1920s. They've opened up King Tutankhamun's tomb, and now everyone is very excited about venturing to Egypt and seeking their fame and fortune inside a pyramid. But as our four adventurers venture inside the pyramid, something is not quite right. There's riches aplenty, but there's also many inhabitants in there that will quickly grab them and turn them into lost souls. So this is a game all about venturing inside a pyramid to then get out again without getting turned into a lost soul yourself.
But you have to wait until the doors are reopened. You're locked inside there, so your round turns become this timer until you are actually able to get out.
We've had a fantastic time playing it, so let's share 5 reasons why we have really enjoyed it. Now, pyramids in Egypt, they're not always the same.
No, definitely not.
And boards in Entombed are not always the same. Every time you play this, you can either use one of the suggested setups, or you can create your own following a certain criteria of rules that you have to meet every time you play. And that means each time you play, it's going to feel very different. The way the walls exist at the start will dictate where your players start and also where the enemies will start. But as you play through the game, that's going to evolve significantly as different switches will move the position of the walls in the game, and a lot of the game focuses on the position of those walls in the pyramid. But every time you play, it's going to start off differently, and every time you end, it's going to be a different pyramid as well.
Yeah, it really does add a lot of different gameplay there, so you can't just sort of rest on your laurels and do the same thing time after time.
Got to think on your feet in this ever-evolving pyramid.
So these switches are something that I do really like in this game. So basically, as you set the board up, you would have set up the walls, and then there are certain places on the board which do also vary depending on your setup, where if you land on them, pass through them, then you'll be able to move the walls. And this is really, really key in the gameplay in order, of course, to keep yourself safe from those inhabitants that are going to come after you and potentially turn you into a lost soul, but also later in the game as well. And you can throw another player under the bus. Of course, you can make yourself safe by blocking off a pathway there, leaving yourself out a nice, safe, long run around any troublesome inhabitants. But you can also open a little gateway to terror for somebody else. And that really does ramp up the gameplay between players, and it really gets your mind thinking, actually, am I best to do something for myself here, or am I better to sort of lead someone in another way? And what makes that even more interesting is that you're not just controlling your character in this game. You're also in control of at least one of these inhabitants.
Yeah, because the inhabitants, they're also in control of switches. And what's great about these switches is they don't just control the walls that are next to you. You can move walls anywhere on the board, so you can remotely cause havoc elsewhere, knowing you are safe where you currently are. Safe until the next player takes their turn, of course. When we played this game as a family, one of the things the other players really enjoyed was the build-up of tension in this game. It all starts quite calm. You're in the middle of the pyramid, you're together, but the danger's on the outskirts. It's not really affecting you all that much at the moment. But as the game progresses, you know you have to set a certain amount of time within the pyramid before the exits even are open. And that creates a sense of, well, do I stay within the safety of the middle, or do I start veering off in different directions? And what are the other players doing? And what are they, more importantly, going to be doing with their inhabitants? By the end, of course, you need to be in the corners, because you can't win the game unless you get to one of those corners. So as the game slowly ticks down. You want to get increasingly further out from safety to a place where you know you can win the game. And of course, when you approach another player, if you are a lost soul, you take their soul. But when do you want to do that? Because if you can get in, take their soul, but you can't get out again on a subsequent turn, they're just going to take the soul straight back out of you to regain their physical form. So you do have this sense of kind of trepidation. Do you dive in there to gain your soul, or do you wait it out, looming like this phantom in the pyramid, until eventually you know you can take it and get to the exit on your next turn, because you can't win the game if you're a lost soul.
Yeah, and what makes that really much more interesting is that this timer of rounds down, as we've said, isn't to the very end of the game. It is to the point where those doors that are in the corners of the board open. So it triggers the start of the end game sequence. It becomes this big race right at the end. Of course, you've been trying to keep yourself safe in varying ways, trying to avoid the inhabitants, trying to avoid those lost souls if they've come on. So it starts off thinking you're sort of 1 versus technically 3 of the inhabitants, because you're controlling 1 at the beginning of the game, and you're sort of mortaling about from the center of the board out and around, just trying to squeeze yourself into some safe corners. But by the end of that game, you've potentially got all of the other 3 players as lost souls after you, if you're still alive, and the inhabitants around as well, chasing after you. So that tension just whooshes right up towards the end of the game as you race to the corner.
And I think it's exciting that there's a potential that no one can win. If all the lost souls remain lost souls by the end of the game, nobody wins, and you're all locked in the pyramid forever, roaming the halls like some tragic phantom.
Entombed really is a tactical pyramid survival game, as it says on the box. It really is all about that puzzle that you're doing. And you're not just making yourself safe and switching those walls around and diving into little cubby holes here, there and everywhere to keep yourself safe. There is even more going on. And it's interesting, the inhabitants, how they're controlled. So there's a deck that controls them. So that's unpredictable, how far they're going to move, and even who is going to move. So those cards flick over. There could be all of them moving, 2 of them moving, 3 of them moving, none of them moving. Each round, it really keeps you on your toes, trying to plan out, oh, shall I risk it? If it turns over 3 spaces, I know I'm going to end up as a lost soul, but maybe they won't move. Maybe I'll be okay here. That tension is really there. And another thing that really spices things up, you get used in the game to sort of using one of those inhabitants to your advantage. They're like your little...
They're yours.
Little friendly
They're
one.
friendly. They're not going to hurt you because you're in control of them.
You're controlling them. You're doing the movement. You're putting them onto a switch to chase them after somebody else. They're never going to be in your way unless you tactically want them to. And there is a time in this game where you might want to turn into a lost soul, which again is interesting. But there is a card in that deck that switches who you control. So there comes a point in the game when everyone switches their inhabitants around, and all of a sudden that one that was bodyguarding you, that's not too far away from you, becomes a real threat. And that turns the game around as well. And so there's loads of points in this game where it becomes very tactical as to how to move, and you're really thinking about the board as a whole, not just where you're positioned.
Entombed is a family-friendly game. It felt like those times when we used to, as a family, as children, gather together and play a game. But what's significant about this, unlike the games I used to play in my childhood, like Labyrinth, is that it has modern mechanics. There's no dice in this game. You're not rolling a dice, oh, I get to move 6. It's card-based, which means you can start doing card counting. You can start working out the probability. You can go, well, I know that inhabitant wants to eat my face, but they are 3 squares away from me. They won't be able to move 3 spaces unless a movement card comes up that says 3, and even then, they're depending on being able to move. Do you risk it? Have you started counting and go, well, lots of 3s have already come up. they're probably not going to be moving 3. There's more likely going to be moving 2, but you don't know for sure. And I do like those kind of modern ideas in this game, that it isn't just about chance, it's about reading, it's about probability, it's about trying to work out what your opponents are doing, which makes it feel like a very modern game. It reminds us of like Corridor and all those games like that, where it does initially look like a kind of random movement of things around the board, of people moving in different ways, and it does feel a bit irregular and erratic. But then you start playing it and things start clicking, and you understand that no, there's a lot of strategy going on in this game.
There really is. And especially as a 2-player, this can get quite cat and mousey. So if you do like those aggressive 2-player games that are out to get each other, you can play this relatively friendly. And I think, if you're playing with younger children, you might want to ease them into that. But you can definitely put your partner in the path of danger purposefully on many occasions in this game. And it's a valid tactic to be going out for each other.
And I think it's testament to the core puzzle in this game that it works as solo mode as well, where you're trying to save all of your explorers and keep them away from the inhabitants. It's just a really clever puzzle that's wrapped up in a family-friendly theme that we don't often see in too many games.
No, it does hark me back to those sort of watching Indiana Jones and those kind of great adventure films that we had in our youth, which I think is quite a nice nostalgia to it.
So that has been Entombed by John Sherman. Once again, remember, everything you're seeing is a prototype copy. It may change significantly once this comes to the final product.
In fact, we know that it will.
And some of the rules we've discussed may even change as well. But as you can gather, we really enjoyed our time playing this game. And if this sounds like the game for you, do head on over to its crowdfunding. A link will be in the description.
And if you've, of course, enjoyed hearing us and want to know more about the board game content that we do, please do click that subscribe button, click the bell for notifications, and you can see more videos all about board games from us about twice a week.
So, as always, thanks so much for watching, and stay safe in those pyramids.
Bye.